A world pulsing with invisible rivers of light. Billions of messages racing through strands thinner than a human hair. A global nervous system carrying every whisper, every memory, every heartbeat of the internet. Now pause. Ask yourself, who made this miracle possible? You've heard the names of tech giants. You've heard the companies. But buried in the shadows is a man whose genius lit the path forward. A black scientist whose name history almost erased. Picture the scene. A glowing web of light draped across the night sky of a city. Every skyscraper connected by silent beams. Every phone call, every video chat, every piece of data you send flowing effortlessly through glass. Glass, something once thought fragile, worthless, yet now it holds the world together. But here's the twist. This miracle wasn't born in comfort. It wasn't born in equality. It was forged in a time when a man's skin color could slam doors shut. When segregation whispered, "You don't belong here." When the very idea that a black mind could reshape the future was laughed out of the room. And yet, one man dared. He didn't just join the fight, he became the fight. He stared down barriers of science. He stared down barriers of racism. And he bent light itself to his will. But here's the tragedy. When the world celebrated fiber optics, the technology that would power the internet, the phones in our hands, the satellites above our heads, his name was missing. Vanished from headlines, forgotten in textbooks, silenced by history. So ask yourself, how does a man carry such brilliance through an age built to break him? What fire burns so deeply that even the weight of segregation could not extinguish it? And why, today, do so few of us know his story? The answer is not simple. It is not comfortable. But it is unforgettable. Because to understand him, to understand how a black scientist helped invent the very lifeline of our modern world, we must step back. Back to a time when the idea of light carrying voices, carrying images, carrying the pulse of human connection was nothing more than science fiction. And that's where our story begins. Picture this. America, the late 1940s. Factories roar with the sound of steel. Soldiers return from war, chasing dreams of suburbs and new beginnings. But beneath the neon lights, another truth lingers. Segregation. Signs that scream whites only. Classrooms divided, dreams divided. An invisible wall built to tell millions of black Americans exactly where they could and could not belong. And in that world, science was no exception. If you were black, the laboratory door was almost always closed. Scholarships scarce. Opportunities fleeting. The idea of a black scientist standing shoulder to shoulder with the world's most powerful minds? Unthinkable. Now imagine the technology of the time. Communication meant wires. Copper wires stretching across cities like tangled vines. Thick, heavy, expensive. Carrying voices slowly, imperfectly. Bulky machines humming with effort just to send a single message across oceans. The dream of flawless, instant communication? It wasn't even a dream. It was fantasy, science fiction. And yet, somewhere, a young boy looked at the world differently. He looked at light, not as decoration, not as something to flicker in lamps or cast shadows on walls, but as possibility. That boy's name was Thomas Mensah. Born in Kumasi, Ghana in 1950, his childhood was filled with both wonder and walls. A brilliant student, hungry to learn, he grew up in a society that mirrored the segregated struggles of America. Science was for the privileged, innovation for the few. But Mensah refused to listen. As a child, he was fascinated by how light moved. He studied how rainbows made rainbows, how reflections bent in broken glass. While others saw colors, He saw patterns. He saw secrets waiting to be unlocked. And when his genius became undeniable, doors cracked open. He won a scholarship to study in France. Imagine it, a young African student, thousands of miles from home, stepping into the laboratories of Lyon, a place where the language was foreign, the culture was foreign, and the expectation was clear: you don't belong here. But Mensah did not flinch. Every room that doubted him became fuel. Every whisper that he wasn't good enough became a fire. Because while the world clung to copper wires and radio towers, Mensah dared to ask, what if light itself could carry our voices? What if streams of colorless beams could cross oceans faster than electricity, faster than sound? Think about the boldness of that dream. In a time when most people were still twisting dials on radios, when television was black and white, when segregation told him to stay small, he was dreaming of bending light itself. But could one young black man, standing in the heart of a divided world, really break through centuries of science and centuries of prejudice to change the future of humanity? That is the question. Imagine standing at the gates of possibility. You've studied harder than anyone. You've earned your place. But every door you knock on slams shut, not because of your mind, but because of the color of your skin. This was the world that greeted a young Thomas Mensah.
Scholarships? Rare. Fellowships? Almost impossible. Every opportunity came with whispers. Not for you. Not your place. Not your time. But here's the thing about doors. When they slam, they echo. And Mensah heard those echoes not as defeat, but as challenge. He studied anyway, day and night. Mathematics, physics, engineering. While others questioned his worth, he sharpened his weapon, knowledge. Resilience became his companion. And resilience opened a door. France. A scholarship to study chemical engineering at the University of Science and Technology in Montpellier. Thousands of miles from home, thousands of miles from the segregation still poisoning America, he stepped into laboratories that most men from his world would never see. But do not imagine this as triumph alone. The lab coat did not erase the stares. The equations did not silence the doubt. Every lecture, every experiment, he carried two battles, one with the science before him and one with the prejudice surrounding him. Fiber optics. In those years, it was fantasy. Engineers still trusted copper. Radio ruled the airwaves. The very idea of sending light through a thread of glass? Impossible. Yet Mensah refused to look away. He gained access to labs that treated fiber optics as a side project, a curiosity. Others laughed, saying, "Glass breaks, glass scatters light, it will never work." Mensah did not laugh. He leaned in. He pressed his face against microscopes, stared at strands thinner than a hair, and thought, what if? This was his first breakthrough. Not yet in the equations, not yet in the engineering, but in the belief, the refusal to treat impossible as final. Still, the sting of dismissal never left him. When colleagues presented, he was overlooked. When experiments succeeded, credit bypassed him. When failures came, blame found him first. But Mensah carried something they did not, the memory of locked doors. Every insult was fuel, every rejection a spark. He would not let them win. And so he worked, hour after hour, testing fibers, measuring losses, searching for the key that others said did not exist. His hands blistered from handling fragile strands. His eyes burned from long nights under lab lights. And yet he kept going. Because this was not just science. This was survival. This was a man proving to himself, to his doubters, to the world, that brilliance has no color. And just when his confidence grew, when it seemed the breakthrough was close, when he finally believed the future was within reach, a new challenge appeared. One so unexpected, so crushing, it would test not just his knowledge, but his entire career. Imagine trying to trap light, not in a mirror, not in a prism, but inside a strand of glass thinner than a human hair and making it travel for miles without fading away. That was the impossible barrier. Every scientist knew the problem. Light leaked. Signals died. The dream of fiber optics collapsed again and again. And in the middle of that storm stood Thomas Mensah. The pressure was suffocating. Corporations poured money into research and lost faith when the results failed. Funding was at risk. Labs grew silent, filled with disappointment and doubt. Colleagues whispered, maybe it just can't be done. But for Mensah, the stakes were different. Failure wasn't just professional, it was personal. Every late night, every experiment carried not only the burden of science, but the shadow of prejudice. If he failed, critics would say, "Of course he did. What else could you expect?" So he refused to stop. He engineered new methods for coating glass fibers. He pushed experiments to higher speeds, faster production. Each test, each tiny improvement dragged light closer to freedom. And then, the breakthrough. Low-loss fiber. At commercial scale. The impossible made real. For the first time, light could carry voices, images, entire worlds without dying. The backbone of the future had been built. But even in triumph, danger lingered. Because in the world of science, success comes with a price. And the question was no longer, would fiber optics work, but who would history remember for making it possible? Picture this: a single strand of glass, so fragile it can snap between two fingers, and yet strong enough to carry the voices of nations. For decades, fiber optics was dismissed as fantasy, an idea trapped in theory, a dream buried in textbooks. But then, everything changed. The breakthrough had come. The glass no longer bled light. The signal no longer died. And suddenly, what was once impossible became unstoppable. The military saw it first. The promise of secure, lightning-fast communication. Whispers in Pentagon corridors. If we can carry commands through light, we can fight wars faster than ever before. Silent lines of glass stretching across bases, carrying secrets too valuable for copper wires. Then came the telecom giants. Boardrooms filled with tension. Executives slamming fists on tables, demanding faster calls, clearer connections, cheaper infrastructure. And fiber optics answered. Miles upon miles of glowing arteries buried beneath cities, across oceans. Suddenly, a phone call from New York to Paris wasn't a miracle. It was an expectation. And then, something bigger than any one man, any one company. The birth of the Internet. Those fragile strands of glass became the veins of a new world, carrying not just voices, but information, data, pictures, entire lives compressed into beams of light. The world had changed. Forever. But here's where the story darkens.
The headlines appeared. Front pages filled with celebration. Fiber optics revolutionizes communication. Patents filed, awards given, names lifted into history. But one name was missing. Thomas Mensah. While others took the stage, shaking hands, accepting prizes, smiling for cameras, Mensah's role faded into the margins. At conferences, his contributions were footnotes. In textbooks, his name barely appeared. In public memory, he was invisible. And imagine how that must have felt. To watch the world transform by your own hands. To know that billions of people were now connected through a dream you helped build. And yet, when history spoke, it spoke someone else's name. Narrator's voice. History remembers the invention, but forgets the inventor. It wasn't just neglect, it was a pattern, one that countless black scientists, inventors, and visionaries had faced. From the traffic light to blood transfusions to the very heart of American innovation. Contribution recognized, but credit stolen. Mensah's story is not just about light traveling through glass. It is about truth struggling to travel through time. And so we are left with a question. Why? Why was his story left in the shadows? Why does a world built on his brilliance not speak his name? And maybe, more importantly, what does that say about us? Picture this: the man who bent light itself, growing older. Not in the glare of cameras, not in the warmth of the world's gratitude, but in the quiet shadows of history. Thomas Mensah's journey did not end with fiber optics. No, he kept moving, kept inventing, kept fighting. He turned his brilliance toward aerospace, developing technologies for high-speed trains and advanced defense systems. He became a voice for Africa's future, pushing for technology hubs, for education, for opportunities that he himself had almost been denied. He stood on stages not to boast, but to remind, to tell young engineers and dreamers that genius comes in every color, every place, every child staring at the world with wonder. And yet, even as he advocated, the world outside remained quiet about his name. Fiber optics fueled a new civilization, global communication, streaming movies in seconds, video calls across oceans, entire economies built on networks of glass and light. All of it touched by Mensah's hand. But what did he gain in return? Not the recognition, not the headlines, not the inspiration his story could have given to generations of young black scientists. What was lost was visibility. And in that silence, millions grew up never knowing that someone who looked like them helped build the very world they live in. Still, Mensah endured. He carried himself with dignity, resilient against erasure, unmoved by the injustice of being forgotten. Because in his heart, he knew the truth that light could not be hidden forever, that one day his story would reach the people it was meant for, that every strand of fiber carrying the world's memories was also carrying his. So here we are, connected, streaming, talking across continents in the blink of an eye, living inside a dream that Thomas Mensah helped make real. And the question remains, can we rewrite history's silence? Can we speak the names that were buried? Can we finally give credit where credit is due? Imagine this. You pick up your phone. You send a message. It travels not through copper, not through the air, but through light. Through strands of glass stretching across oceans, glowing beneath cities, carrying the pulse of humanity. And behind that miracle stands a man most of the world never knew. Thomas Mensah, a black scientist whose vision helped bend light itself, whose brilliance helped create the very foundation of our digital age, but whose name was pushed into the shadows. His story is not just about science. It is about perseverance. It is about courage. It is about the fight to be seen in a world that tried to look away. So remember this. Every text, every call, every video streamed across continents. They all carry a fragment of his dream. And now it is up to us to make sure his dream isn't remembered without his name, to make sure his light is never hidden again. If stories like this move you, share them, because history's hidden voices deserve to be heard. They deserve to live. They deserve to shine.